Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond Reality, the podcast where we explore how cutting-edge technologies like virtual reality and artificial intelligence are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Brianna Hodge, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the ever-insightful Lyra Thorne. Today, we have a truly exciting topic, how VR is revolutionizing the way healthcare professionals are trained. Lyra, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Brianna. I'm really looking forward to diving into this discussion because the impact VR is having on healthcare training is something everyone in the field should know about.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that not only healthcare professionals, but also patients and the general public should be aware of. VR is no longer just a tool for entertainment or niche applications. It's genuinely transforming how medical professionals are educated and how they prepare to save lives. Today, we're going to explore how VR is making that possible, why it's such a game changer, and maybe even get into some real-world case studies that showcase its effectiveness. So let's kick things off with the basics, Lyra. We know that traditional healthcare training methods, like studying from textbooks, watching procedure videos, and even practicing on mannequins, have been used for years, and for good reason they work. But VR is entering the scene in a big way now. Why do you think VR is becoming a preferred method of training? What advantages does it offer over these tried-and-true methods?
Great questions, Bri. Traditional methods are definitely valuable and have shaped generations of healthcare professionals, but they have limitations. They're typically passive forms of learning. You read about a technique, maybe watch a video or practice on a mannequin, but you're not truly experiencing what it's like in a real-life scenario. VR changes all that by providing an immersive, interactive learning environment. Instead of passively absorbing information, the learner is actively participating in medical procedures, diagnosis, and emergency situations.
That's such a powerful shift when you think about it. It's almost like the difference between watching someone swim and actually jumping in the water yourself. VR gives professionals the ability to engage with their learning in a way that's visceral and immediate. And that kind of hands-on learning is essential in healthcare. You can read all the textbooks in the world, but when it comes to dealing with a patient's life, especially in an emergency, there's nothing quite like having been in a similar situation before, even if it was virtual.
Exactly, and what's really groundbreaking about VR is that it allows for unlimited practice. In traditional settings, you might only get one shot at a procedure or an emergency scenario. In VR, you can repeat it over and over until you've mastered it. Let's say a medical student is learning how to perform a laparoscopic surgery. In the real world, they may only get to observe or assist a few times before being thrust into the procedure themselves. In VR, they can practice it 100 times if necessary.
And that repetition is so key to building confidence and competence, especially for new trainees. I'm reminded of the old adage, practice makes perfect, but in healthcare it's more like practice makes you prepared. If something goes wrong in a real-world situation, the consequences can be dire. VR creates a safe space where trainees can learn from their mistakes without the fear of harming a patient. It's that combination of practical skill development and confidence building that really sets VR apart. Plus, it's not just about the technical side. Being able to practice managing stress in a virtual operating room, with alarms going off and the pressure of a ticking clock, is invaluable. That brings me to my next question. One of the biggest challenges in healthcare training is the gap between knowledge and application. We've all heard stories about new graduates who excelled in school but struggle when faced with the pressures of real-life situations. How does VR help bridge that gap between knowing the theory and actually being able to apply it under pressure?
This is where VR really shines, Bri. Traditional education teaches students what to do in theory, but the transition to clinical practice can be overwhelming. Even the most prepared student can freeze when they're suddenly faced with a critical patient and have to make decisions in a high-stakes environment. VR helps bridge that gap by putting learners in realistic scenarios that require them to apply their knowledge, make quick decisions, and manage stressful situations in real time.
It's one thing to understand a medical procedure in a textbook, but it's a completely different thing to execute that procedure when there's a patient's life on the line and the room is buzzing with activity. I've read about studies that show medical trainees often experience what's called knowledge decay. They know what to do, but when faced with a high-pressure situation, that knowledge can become harder to access. VR seems like the perfect solution for that because it allows trainees to practice in environments that mimic real-world pressure. So when they do encounter those situations in real life, they're more mentally and emotionally prepared.
Absolutely, and the evidence is there to support it. For example, there was a study conducted at the University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine. They used VR to train residents for emergency intubation, which is a high-stakes procedure. The residents who trained in VR reported feeling far more confident when they had to perform the procedure in real life. And the reason for that is simple. VR allowed them to experience the pressure of the moment over and over again until they were comfortable with their decision-making process.
That's so impactful, Lyra. The ability to make decisions in the heat of the moment is often what separates good healthcare professionals from great ones. And with VR, it seems like we're not only teaching them the how, but also the when and why. I think that's a critical distinction because real-world healthcare situations aren't black and white. A good clinician has to constantly assess and adjust based on the nuances of the patient and the situation. VR gives them the practice they need to make those split-second decisions with confidence. And as you mentioned earlier, if they make a mistake in the VR simulation, they can reflect and try again until they get it right. Speaking of decision-making, let's talk a bit more about how VR helps sharpen those critical thinking skills. In the medical field, clinicians are often faced with scenarios where they need to make rapid, life-saving decisions. How does VR help professionals develop those quick thinking abilities?
In healthcare, particularly in emergency medicine or surgery, decisions often have to be made in seconds. VR simulations create these high-pressure environments where healthcare professionals are forced to think quickly and act decisively. For example, in a VR trauma simulation, you might have multiple patients arriving after an accident. The trainee has to assess who needs care first, what resources are available, and make split-second calls on treatment, all while dealing with the stress of alarms and the movement of other team members. The more they practice in VR, the more their decision-making abilities improve because they're essentially building that muscle memory for critical thinking.
That's incredible. You're talking about the ability to train the brain to make better, faster decisions in a way that feels like second nature. That reminds me of a study I came across out of Harvard, where medical students who use VR for emergency response scenarios performed significantly better in real-world assessments. They were faster, more accurate, and felt more in control of the situation. It's almost like VR not only helps them master the skills they need, but also the mindset they need to approach difficult scenarios. And that's priceless in healthcare, where even a few seconds can be the difference between life and death.
Exactly. And what's even more impressive is that VR can simulate a wide range of scenarios that might be rare in real life, but crucial to prepare for. For instance, dealing with a mass casualty event isn't something you can easily recreate in traditional training settings. But in VR, you can simulate that environment, allowing healthcare professionals to practice prioritizing care and managing resources under the most extreme conditions.
That's so important. Healthcare professionals don't get to choose the scenarios they walk into. They have to be ready for anything. And it seems like VR gives them the opportunity to practice those once-in-a-career events before they ever face them in reality. Being able to simulate rare but critical situations like a mass casualty event or a complex surgical complication provides a level of preparedness that traditional training just can't offer. It's like having a tool that allows you to explore every possibility before it ever happens. We've been talking a lot about the technical side of things, but what about soft skills? Communication, empathy, and bedside manner are just as crucial as medical expertise. How does VR help with those softer human aspects of healthcare training?
That's a great point. VR has an incredible ability to not only teach technical skills, but also help healthcare professionals develop their soft skills. For example, there are VR simulations specifically designed to improve communication between doctors and patients, especially in difficult conversations, like delivering bad news or discussing end-of-life care. These scenarios allow trainees to practice their tone, body language, and emotional response in a way that feels real, but doesn't carry the emotional weight of a real patient interaction.
I think that's such a vital aspect of healthcare that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Being technically proficient is one thing, but being able to connect with patients on a human level is what truly makes a great healthcare professional. I've seen studies where VR simulations that focus on empathy training have been shown to improve how clinicians interact with their patients, making them more compassionate and understanding. And the impact on patient satisfaction is undeniable. It's amazing to think that a technology as advanced as VR can help bring out those very human qualities in healthcare professionals. We've covered a lot today, everything from improving decision-making skills to empathy training. Looking ahead, Lyra, where do you see VR in healthcare training in the next 5 to 10 years?
The future is bright, Bree. I see VR becoming a standard part of healthcare education at all levels. Not only will we see more institutions adopting VR, but I think we'll also see more advanced simulations that incorporate AI to create dynamic scenarios, ones that change in real time based on the user's decision. We'll also see more specialized training programs, especially in fields like neurosurgery or emergency medicine, where VR can provide experiences that are hard to replicate in real life.
That's exciting. I can't wait to see how VR continues to transform the way we train healthcare professionals. It feels like we're on the cusp of something really groundbreaking. What excites me the most is the potential for VR to become more tailored to individual learning needs. Everyone learns differently, and the idea that a VR simulation could adapt to a trainee's strengths and weaknesses in real time is a game changer. It's not just about training more professionals, it's about training better professionals, and that ultimately leads to better patient care. We're witnessing the future of healthcare education, and it's incredible to be part of this conversation. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Beyond Reality. Thank you so much, Lyra, for all your insights and for taking us through the fascinating world of VR and healthcare training. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can follow us on social media for more updates on how VR and AI are shaping the future of healthcare. Until next time, I'm Brianna Hodge, and this is Beyond Reality.
Thanks, everyone. Stay curious and keep exploring new realities.